Good evening, captive audience. Don Anderson here. Um, the photo on your entry to come into this podcast still shows Sonny Danforth's picture there, and it'll remain that way until I figure out the technology for removing it. Because you all know by now, Sonny retired from doing these podcasts for the time being. She won't be a permanent host, but she will come on periodically as a guest. That probably won't start until the late September timeframe. Until then, you're stuck with me as the one guy who's going to be monologuing you here on the events of the day. So thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Feel free to chat, to provide chats. I like it when you all chat because it lets me know that you're actually there and lets you know what your thoughts are around what you're hearing. So today, as every day it seems, we have a tremendous amount of material to cover because this administration, it seems like, never sleeps, and there's so much to discuss. And I'm going to try to do this in a fashion that isn't such machine gun like in terms of its delivery, but there's so much to get in and so little time to get it done that sometimes I just have to give you that machine gun type quality, right? So thanks once again. Hey, Lori, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And I think the best thing to start with here, and I'm going to put this in the chat line, I'm going to give you a lot of reading material tonight, right? So hopefully when you have an opportunity, you'll take a chance to read some of this stuff because there's just such great stuff out there to look at. So this first one I picked up from the Blaze Media, which is a great source of daily news if you'd like to go there. And there's an article there which is essentially a synopsis of a speech that was given by Vice President Vance. And I think it was such a great speech because what it really touched on was what makes America different. That wasn't the title of the talk, but what is it that makes the United States different? What is it that makes the United States unique and different from any other country that's ever existed in the world? And the way I like to synopsize this is in basically three reasons why the United States is unique and completely different than any other country that's ever existed in the world. I think we'd all do well to literally memorize these three things. The first one is it's a constitutional republic founded on principles of rule of law by 62 men who founded the country and founded it based on a study of looking at the 5,000 previous years of human history in order to determine what's the best form of government. And this is what they came up with. So it's not a democracy. In a democracy, you'd have the majority rule. So it's not majority rule. That's why we have an electoral college. It's not majority rule because that mitigates against the majority being tyrannical against the minority. So it's been a brilliant system of governance for the last 200 and close to 50 years. The second leg to this brilliant system is the free market economics. Adam Smith, rather, the founder of that book, The Wealth of Nations, free market economics has delivered more wealth in a shorter period of time to more people than any other system ever devised by man. And this will give you a sense for how sensational this system has been. In 1900, average life expectancy in the world was, I think it was 27, 28 years. Now it's 72. Average life expectancy in the United States in 1900 was about 40. Now it's 82. So we've literally not only doubled life expectancy in the United States, but more than doubled it in the rest of the world, all due to free market economics practiced under the rubric of a constitutional republic. But then the third leg of this triad, and perhaps the most important piece, is the moral code, because none of this works without a functional moral code. And the Judeo-Christianity ethic, Judeo-Christian ethic around morality. So you don't have to have a policeman on every corner because the vast majority of the people are going to do the right thing, whether someone's looking or not looking. And that's what makes this place sensational and unique from any other place in the world that's ever existed. So those are, I think, the fundamental principles that he communicates in that speech. You can move to France, you'll never be French. You can move to Japan, you'll never be Japanese. You can move to Russia, you'll never be Russian. You can move to Nigeria, you'll never be Nigerian. But you can move to the United States, raise your hand, swear an oath, learn these principles, and you're an American. And there's nothing like it that's ever existed before. And we need to celebrate that, which is a great segue into the very next thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is our educational system. So one of the things, and let's see if I can pull this up one moment here. I'm going to give you another, like I said before, I'm going to give you some items to read. So one of the things that just has occurred is the Trump administration has just passed legislation that positions states to provide funding for kids to take their tax dollars and be able to use those funds for private education. Now, this is hugely important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it provides competition to a system that we know is failed and doesn't work. And that is our Marxist governmental public school educational system. So let me just speak to just a quick moment about the public school educational system has not produced, and one of the reasons why we have so many problems right now. So if you take a look at that public educational system, it is not transmitting the fundamental knowledge that I just described around what makes this country great. As a result, these youth coming along don't know anything about their country, don't know anything about its history, don't know anything about its greatness, have learned to hate it, and as a result, they just want to tear it down. A lot of that comes from the fact that they're taught to hate their country and not taught about how sensational the country is that they've grown up in. Now, most of the people in this audience are probably somewhere around my age. Back in the days when public school education was still decent. If you graduated high school after 1985, I submit to you that you didn't get the same education as someone who graduated before 1985, because before that, those teachers came out of the Great Depression era, went through World War II era, were still teaching the fundamentals. You still had 10 Commandments. You still had Judeo-Christianity. You still said the Pledge of Allegiance. All of those things were said. So the fundamentals were still in place. But since then, that generation that came up after that came up in an era where all of the universities had started teaching teachers how to hate their country. And those teachers got out of those universities and then they spread that throughout the system. So now we're dealing with a completely different animal. As a result, these kids know nothing of Paul Revere, Booker T. Washington, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Ethan Allen, Samuel Adams. You could mention these people and you could ask them on a street corner and they won't have any knowledge of that. They will have never heard of Bunker Hill, Boston Tea Party, Daniel Boone, Chancellorsville, Belleau Wood, Pearl Harbor. All of those things are almost second nature to us. When we came along in school, we at least know about it or know what it was. If we don't know it flat cold, these kids don't have any of that. And if you don't know what it is about your country that you love, then why would you fight for it? And then why? And in fact, if you think it's the most destructive thing ever made by man, you will be against it. And that is one of the reasons we see the things we see in the street are people who hate their country because they don't even know their country. They're so ignorant that they don't realize that they are living in the wealthiest generation that has ever existed in humankind. If you were born in the United States, if you're fortunate enough, and pretty much everybody in this audience is, if you're fortunate enough to been born in the United States after 1945, you are in the top 1% of the 1% of the 1% in all the 6,000 years of human history to have ever lived in terms of living a wealthy life. One of our biggest problems is obesity. When has that been a problem in human history, right? There's other reasons for that, I know, but we don't have an issue with food and never have. That is absolutely amazing. And that's something that's not taught to these kids. So they are spoiled rotten, have no idea the greatness that they've grown up in. So I think one of the greatest things that has been done here is these states have to opt in to take advantage of these federal dollars. And we know that the red states are going to do that and give their parents an opportunity to have a choice or a say-so in terms of the education that their kids are going to get. We know that the blue states are likely going to be against that because they'll say things like, it'll hurt the public school system. They're all about saving the public school system, protecting teachers' unions. You'll notice they're not about protecting kids. They'll give lip service to that. But then I like to say the proof is in the pudding. So what has the educational system delivered over the last 40 years? In any system that's been in place for a long period of time and has not changed, that tells you that that system is benefiting somebody. You can forget about what they're saying and look at what they're doing and look at the results that they're getting. So what does the public school system deliver to us in the last 40 years? You see these man on the street interviews they do all the time where kids can't tell you within 20 years or within 50 years when the Civil War occurred. They can't tell you what year the War of 1812 was fought, for crying out loud. They don't know how many stripes there are on how many stripes there are on the flag. They don't know how many stars there are on the flag. They don't know the capital of the United States, and they sure as heck don't know the capital of their own countries. The lack of knowledge is absolutely stunning. And these are kids, by the way. They oftentimes do these man on the street interviews on university campuses. The spectacular ignorance of students on our university campuses is absolutely, well, spectacular. What else can you say? Any sixth grader would have known this information 50 years ago. So you have to ask yourself this question: how can a system, and SAT scores, by the way, have been plummeting for the last 40 or 50 years. So how can a system so bad last so long? Well, it has lasted that long because it is benefiting people in its current form. And if I can remember there's three groups that benefit from this. A, it's a jobs program for public schools teachers and teachers unions. That's the first group that it benefits. B, it's a daycare system so that parents don't have to raise their own kids. That's precisely what it is. And it's been highly successful at that. And then C, it's a great place to raise kids and turn them into Marxists. It's a great place for the government to turn kids into Marxists who hate their kids, who hate their parents, and hate their country. It's been phenomenally successful at that. So you have to always look at whatever the system is in place and look at the results that it's getting rather than what they're saying it's doing. And if it's doing that for a long period of time without having changed, then you know the true nature of the beast. And that's the true nature of the public school system. One of the reasons I love what the Trump administration has proposed in terms of giving people their own money back so they can make a choice is that it'll do one of two things. It'll give the parent an opportunity to take their kid out of the public school system using their dollars, by the way, or it forces the public school system. It gives them a chance to compete like everybody else. If you want to keep the kid, then you go improve your system. You don't complain about the parents who pull their kids out. That'd be similar to like back in the 80s when the automotive industry was crying loud about how the Japanese car industry was cleaning our clocks. Well, rather than complaining about that and trying to get protection, what they should have been doing was building better cars. If you remember, cars had gotten pretty shoddy in the 80s. American cars were big, they were clunky, they were gas guzzlers, they were terrible. And Japanese car companies came along and cleaned our clocks until we figured it out. And now American car companies are sensational. Competition helped it out. I can see the same thing happening. Well, it's going to be hard to say this because public school systems are, by definition, going to be bad because they are government. But they'll be forced to improve or go out of business like everyone else. And parents are already voting with their feet. Homeschooling has gone up like I think it's 300 or 400%. It's gone from only like 3% up to 12% the last time I looked about 3 or 4 years ago. And you got to figure private schooling has gone up a tremendous amount as well. And there's large numbers of kids who just aren't showing up anywhere in these classrooms and schools who have lost population. And people don't necessarily report that they're not going to public school anymore. They just stop going. And that's a great thing because it shows you that parents are realizing, hey, I'm not getting anything for this. The sad part is you're still being taxed for something that you can't use. And that's the horrendous thing about it. So I am pretty jazzed about that development. So bear with me here while I look at the next topic. We have a bunch of them. Oh, here's one that's pretty interesting. I don't know if any of you all had seen, and this goes to more of the local news, and this is Portland. So there is a church, and I just felt like I had to comment on this. Let me just post this link for this. There's a Portland church that put up a protest sign against alligator Alcatraz, right? And I just find this so amusing. So I can't remember where the church is located, but I think it's in Southeast Portland. And this pastor has a church that is basically pro illegal immigration and is protesting alligator Alcatraz. And I just thought it'd be worth just giving a quick and dirty conversation around what's happening with these churches that are basically allowing themselves to behave as arms of the government, if you will, right? And that's precisely what's happening here. So they've got misplaced altruism going on, basically. So they feel like they need to do all of these things to help illegal immigrants. No one ever says to them or thinks to them, the reason I call it misplaced altruism, but they're caring so much about people who shouldn't be here or here illegally in the first place, and not caring about the people who are the citizens who are being robbed by the fact that these people are here. Because the people that are being hurt by these illegal immigrants the most are citizens of this country who need the assistance the most. So it's their schools. They're going to be the schools of poor white, brown, and black kids are going to be ones that are overrun with these illegal immigrants. The medical systems that support those same citizens are going to be overrun by these illegal immigrants. The crime is going to happen in their neighborhoods because that's where they're going to be moving. The jobs are going to be taken away or forcing down the wage rates are going to be in their communities, because those who are middle class and above don't have to deal with that, at least initially. The people that get hurt the most are the citizens among us who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic income scale. So if these churches were really about helping citizens, this is start by helping our citizens at home and not helping people that belong in another country. So there's just my food for thought on that one. There was another interesting Portland article, and that had to do with the minimum wage. And I'm always amazed that this keeps coming up over and over again. It's a basic economic fact that if you have once you impose a minimum wage, you basically stated to an employer that you have to hire people at a wage that's more than what their value is to the marketplace. So, for example, an employer is forced to pay $20 an hour for an employee that's only giving value at $10 an hour. That employer is losing $10 an hour. They can't survive doing that. So, of course, they're not going to sit there in a vacuum and just take that. They can't say anything out loud because they'll be called mean, evil, nasty, misogynist, racist, all the other terms that leftists always use. So what they start to do is they quietly start reducing the number of employees that they need to run that business. And you see this everywhere. You go to a toll booth at a parking lot, you don't see somebody working in the toll booth anymore. It's all electronic. Well, there's a reason for that. You go to a bridge crossing, now you throw your money in a bucket or it has a credit card scan. There's nobody in the booth anymore. Why? Well, it costs too much to hire somebody to do that. You go to the grocery store. Used to be 10 people working there as cashiers. Now you got maybe 4 human cashiers, and you got 6 self-service places. Why? Because the grocery store decided, well, we're going to reduce the number of employees that we have in order to make up for it. So what this minimum wage thing does is it helps a handful of people get to keep their job, and it hurts a ton of other people who will never get a job. But for the leftist politician, they can go on TV and say, yeah, it's really visible. I was able to raise the wage for poor Jane here, right? Meanwhile, Jack, Jane, Sally, and Sue don't have a job at all because of what they've done. And you can see this. You go to a fast food restaurant. I just find it kind of amusing to watch this happen. Now you got kiosks, and you'll notice they require less people to run those stores than they used to. The food shows up prepackaged, and all they have to do is just reheat it and get it to you because it's just more efficient to do it that way and get rid of employers. I remember there was one, I can't remember what fast food restaurant it was a number of years ago, but I was talking to, I read an article about the owner of a number of these franchises. And when you go to the drive-through window, the person talking to you at the drive-through window is not in the store. They're not even in the United States. They're in India. Imagine that, because it costs so much less to ship the labor overseas and have them do it here than it does to pay that minimum wage. So that minimum wage is absolutely destroying us. And what it's doing is eliminating the floor. It's eliminating that entry-level job for a lot of those particularly poor and minority kids to get that first rung on the ladder, that first job. We're going to learn those basic skills of how to behave in the marketplace, how to show up on time, how to respond to management, how to have conversations in the workplace, how to basically work in a structured environment. They're not getting that because they're not getting hired. That's one of the reasons why the Black teenage unemployment rate's like 50%. That's 50. 50% don't have a job. I remember when I was a kid, 14, 15, everybody had a job. Everybody in my block had some kind of a part-time gig. And I ran a little mini experiment on this with my son a couple of years ago. I went out with him and we tried to find a fast food job. Now, these days, you don't fill out a piece of paper like you used to. You go online and you try to apply that way. But we weren't getting any responses. And when I was a teenager, you just walked in the store. If you could fog a mirror and you were a teenager, you got the job, right? So I physically went to stores myself to see what that would look like, these fast food places. And they would all say they're hiring, but they'd never hire you. And I'm convinced that the reason why is a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't have any experience. So if the wage is going to be $20 an hour, I'm going to hire. Now, suddenly, I'm not going to hire somebody who's going to fog a mirror. I got to do some real due diligence to make sure that you're not going to turn over, because the cost of training you and hiring you is now so great that I can't afford to train you. So that's one of the things this does. The other thing is, it might be much easier for me to get an illegal and then pay them under the table. I'm pretty certain that a whole lot of that is happening. So it's a lot less expensive to do that. So for those reasons, these teenagers are unemployed and unable to get a job if they wanted to. So our generation might make a lot of noise around this lazy generation, and partially that may be true, but it might also be true they just can't get a job because of what these states are doing with these insane minimum wages. Not to mention the fact that a lot of these companies are literally leaving those states, and the stories of that are legion, of restaurant chains and hotels and fast food places literally leaving geographies with these high wage rates because it just doesn't make business sense to do it, which further drives up unemployment at the bottom of the income scale. But because these liberals who vote for this stuff, it doesn't adversely affect them. I mean, once again, if you live in Tiburon, Lake Oswego, Bellevue, Palos Verdes, you name the hoity-toity area, they don't have any problems with this. So they just keep voting for this stuff because it's virtue signaling and they feel good, but they never have the adverse impact happen to them from doing this stuff. It takes a longer time. It will affect them eventually. It just takes a longer time to happen. So anyway, thought you'd all find that. And yeah, Pat, yeah, pretty soon drive-through will be push button. Yeah, oh yeah, there's no question ahead. Yeah, people are calling on the phone, having their food sent to them. All of these things aren't good long term for those at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale, or for those who are looking to get that first entry level gig. I was really shocked at how hard it was to get that first entry level gig. So anyway, I thought you'd all find that pretty interesting. One more local article. I have to pull this up. We got to do a little Portland news, and that is I find these kinds of things just fascinating. So here's an article. I can't remember the publication, but if you click on it, you'll be able to figure out where this publication came from. But it's about a local Fred Meyer. So the Gateway. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with Portland, but Southeast Portland. Actually, it's northeast, but outer northeast, like around 82nd and Halsey. There's a Fred Meyer at the Gateway. Fred Meyer is going to be closing, and this place has been there. Boy, I think it's been there since I was a kid, probably at least 50 years. And the whole article, not one time asked why it was closing. It's similar to the vaccine stuff. People drop dead, and nobody wants to, posit the possible reasons why. It's just they report that they drop dead, and it's normal for 18 to 20-year-olds just drop dead. And we have an article I'll talk about a little bit later on that. But in this case, there's no questioning of the obvious reason. So why is this Fred Meyer's closing? Well, the reason it's closing is because the crime's out of control. And the reason the crime's out of control is because the Portland Attorney General won't enforce the law. And that area has horrendous crime. And it's sad because the area where this is, I went to school in that area for a little while growing up. And it was a fine area then, your basic working class, blue collar neighborhood. No crime ever happened. Now, the place is so bad, the crime is so bad that the store can't survive. And if you know Portland at all, and I was thinking to myself, where's the nearest grocery store to this place? So you have to go a long ways to find a grocery store to cover that neighborhood. I'm thinking like 30 or 40 blocks to the east, there might be a Winco. The airport, maybe 4 miles to the north. To the west, you got to go clear in the town. You got to go a long ways to get to a true grocery store now. And there's huge swaths of Portland where this is the case. And it just amazes me that nobody speaks to this. They all want to talk about food deserts, but they don't want to do anything about the very things that are causing food deserts to happen. One of them, outrageous minimum wages, and the other one, the unwillingness, the lack of backbone to enforce the law and put criminals in jail who steal from these stores. Those two things are combining to absolutely wreck Multnomah County in particular. So thought you'd all find that probably not surprising, given what happens there, but interesting nonetheless. And you have to ask yourself this: how much punishment can the citizens of Portland take? How much more punishment? How many times you got to get punched in the nose as a leftist before you finally realize that this stuff is destroying you? We're seeing in real time, a whole lot of punishment being dished out, and I'm an optimist. I think that they are going to change. I think they're in the process of changing, but change takes time when the insanity of leftism takes hold of you. So there's a lot of good news too, though, to report, and I'm happy to report on that as well. One of these things, let's see if I can't get that article up as well, is that Wall Street Journal, and remember, the Wall Street Journal basically hates this administration. But when the evidence is this obvious that even they have to report it, the S&P 500 has broken a new record in terms of trade deals. So the economy is absolutely sizzling, and this is fantastic news. And most important, isn't fantastic news to show that these tariffs are working. And they've been trying to say it's not going to work. They've been trying to say it's going to drive inflation. They've been trying to say it's going to shut down the economy. They've been saying this ever since this man was elected, and all we've seen is fantastic results. Nobody's worried about the prices of eggs anymore. You never hear that anymore. Nobody's complaining about inflation because there isn't any. Nobody's worried about jobs because unemployment is like lower than it's ever been. Job growth is there, and we just started. So there's some fantastic news for you there. The next thing I thought, and I told you I was going to be rapid fire today because it was just so much stuff that crossed my desk. And I think this is really interesting and amazing. And this is that the culture is shifting. And it truly is. You remember 2 or 3 years ago, there were things you just couldn't talk about. The leftist media pretty much owned everything. And now that leftist media is on the run. And here's a couple of news items that substantiate what I'm just saying. So Joy Reid got fired, right? Leftist reporter just fired. Stephen Colbert fired. This is awesome. And they don't just fire these people because they don't like their ideology. They love their ideology. They fired them because they're losing a fortune because nobody's watching them. People are flocking in droves away from them because they're sick of the lying and their shows aren't even interesting. And it's just awesome that this is happening, which means that the conservatism is going to rebound in the media, not in the ABC, CBS, big media, blogosphere, if you will, but everywhere else it's flourishing. And I'll get more on that in a moment. And then the lawsuits. ABC had to pay a defamation lawsuit to Trump, $15 million. 60 Minutes with that scam they ran during the debate with Kamala Harris, where they basically gave her multiple takes and then modified her interview to make her look good. That is one of the most appalling things I've ever heard of, by the way. Talk about a way to just destroy your credibility. Well, 60 Minutes managed to destroy all of its credibility in one show by doing that, and they were forced to pay a $16 million lawsuit as well. It's absolutely amazing that they've done this to themselves, but they have utterly done this to themselves. I thought this was another interesting one that happened in Washington State. Federal court blocked the law. Washington State actually passed a law, or their governor, their Catholic governor, by the way, to target the seal of confession. So basically what they wanted to say was anything that's said in confession can be required of the priest to tell what the confessor said. The thinking being that if you had a murderer in confession and they told their priest, then the priest would have to tell that this person was a murderer. Now, that seal of confession has been respected for the entire time our country has been in existence. And that's reason enough. But the other reason you got to ask yourself is, well, what percentage of murderers do they expect to capture this way? Well, obviously, the answer is just about nil. So that clearly wasn't their reason to reduce crime. Their reason is to destroy religiosity, because that's what the left is about destroying religion, which means then you can destroy the family, which means then that the government becomes your family. That's their ultimate objective. And a lot of people have a hard time believing that. They say, oh, Don, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And I say to that, yes, I am a conspiracy theorist, because everything that you see around you happened as a result of conspiracy. Somebody conspired to put the stop sign on your street corner. Somebody conspired to build your house. Sears and Roebuck conspired to start a retail chain. 56 guys conspired to start the United States of America. Conspiracies happen everywhere. And yes, they are conspiring to destroy us by destroying our families and by destroying the church. And Marxism demands loyalty to the state. I was just looking this up just a moment ago, and I think a quote by Mussolini says it better than anything. All within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. You have to understand that's the end objective of those who run the Democrat Party right now. Not all Democrats, obviously, but the leadership of the Democrat Party. This is what they're about. And I think more and more of the population is, if they're not responding to the ideology of it, they're at least responding to the results they're getting from it. I wish they respond to the ideology, because if you respond to the ideology of it, you don't have to get the punishment that comes from actually experiencing it. But those in blue states, or I should say, blue metropolitan areas, the Chicago's, the Detroits, the Washington D.C.'s, the Baltimore's, Portland, Seattle's, Los Angeles, San Francisco's, they apparently all have to experience the actual result of it, and so that's what we're seeing. Nothing but destruction. So that I thought was really interesting as well. So I saw a Substack article that I wanted to share with you all, because I think this is really interesting piece, because it talks about more around how the culture is shifting. And I think this is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to cut and paste this link to that as well, because I think this is really interesting reading when you get a chance. So what this is basically saying is there's a whole bunch of things that are demonstrating that the culture is shifting, and is shifting to the right. I'm going to walk you through just a few of these, because I think they're really interesting. Firstly, they'll call it the rise of the manosphere. That is, compared to the 2020 election, men in the age 18 to 29 age group shifted highly in favor of Trump, with 60% of them voting for him. Now, if you recall, a lot of the dialogue on the left has been how women are voting more and more for liberals. But what they're not reporting on is young men in particular are voting more and more for on the conservative side, and it's showing up here. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. If you just do your own data, if you're your own research, you don't have to rely on me or rely on some news. Just look on your TV screen and see what you see. When you turn on the major networks, you see a ton of women. You'll see right and left. You're going to see Maria Bartiromo, Harris Faulkner, Shannon Beam, Ainsley Earhart, Laura Ingraham. And oftentimes they'll have 3 reporters on there. It'll be 2 women and 1 man. 4 reporters will be 3 women and 1 man. And you see this all the time. And that's on the right. On the left, you'll see the usual suspects: Andrea Mitchell, Whoopi Goldberg, Sunny Hostin, Joy Behar. The whole show on The View is like all women. So you just don't see men. Well, what is that going to do? Over time, you're going to drive them somewhere else. And where have they gone? Well, they've gone away from the big networks. And where they've gone is to the blogosphere, to the podcast arena. And they're showing up there by the millions. So you think about Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and they're drawing millions of views. In fact, I saw a stat. I think it was one of Rogan's had 50 million. That's 50 million. And you look at some of the reasons those 2 people I just mentioned earlier who were being eliminated, they were having only 100, 200,000, 300,000 views. Meanwhile, people like Rogan and Peterson are getting between 15 to 50 million views. What do you think is going to happen over time? Whether those networks like them or not, they can't keep losing a fortune like that. So this, again, is good news. The market's driving things. And this is what happens when there's freedom. People will learn over time. They'll make great decisions over time. And the right things will happen if freedom to think, if freedom to reason, and freedom to choose what they want is in play. So I think that is an absolutely awesome phenomenon that we're seeing. A couple of other things in terms of this movement to the right: the explosion of trad content. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with trad content. So basically, I wasn't familiar with this until my kids described it to me. But basically, trad is short for traditional. So traditional women. So women are going online who are very traditional and basically talking about their traditional lives, about raising kids, about the beauty of raising kids, the beauty of going to church, the beauty of supporting their husband. And this is in direct counter movement to the leftist push for women having their own careers, and women basically the old I don't need no man culture that the left has been pushing. Now, I'm not saying that women shouldn't be able to have their own career, do all those things. They absolutely should, but it should be their choice. And what the left has done is they've denigrated women who chose not to do what they want to see them doing, and that's have a career. If women choose to stay home, raise kids, that's their choice. They should be able to do that without being without being put down. So now the pendulum is swinging the other direction, is my point. And it's pretty amazing to see this swing happen. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. So I thought that was pretty amazing. One other thing, and I thought this is pretty cool as well. It's a little thing, but it's another one of those little things masquerading as little things. It's actually a big thing. And Trump has come out and started beating up these sports teams who changed their names at the behest of the left. So you think about the Washington Redskins. Now they're Washington, I don't know, Commanders or something like totally uninspiring. And Trump has come out and said, change your names back. And he's calling them out. Same with the Cleveland Indians. Cleveland Indians, old school name that's been around forever, and they changed their name to something completely uninspiring. I can't even remember what it is. It's so uninspiring. And he's calling these owners out and telling them, change it back. And I think there's a better than good chance that they will. A lot of Indian groups are for the risk. In fact, most of them are. They're eliminating their culture from the national conversation by doing this. And I think there's a very good chance that that might happen. So yet another sign that the culture is moving rightward, and a visible sign. And I think that's also a great thing. So a lot of great things happening on the cultural front that I think are pretty inarguable. Then I had to take a look at this. We have to go to the health scene a little bit. And this allows me to basically speak to RFK again, because I think he's doing so many sensational things that kind of fly beneath the radar. And one of them is putting the kibosh to those who want to enslave us all with the World Health Organization. So among the many things that the World Health Organization, or WHO, tried to impose on us most recently, is they wanted to expand their authority so that they could unilaterally declare health emergencies whenever they wanted to, and then do that across borders, and do that without individual countries being able to make their own decisions. So they wanted to create a framework for cross-border biomedical surveillance, digital vaccine passports, border control coordination, all of that without national approval. And Kennedy has pretty much put the kibosh to all of that. And if the United States isn't doing it, then nobody else is going to be doing it either. So this is an awesome thing. If ever was one organization that's all about one world government, one world rule, it's the World Health Organization. And anything we can do to cut the legs out from underneath that organization is going to be a great thing. So that is great news. Here's an article I found in the Epoch Times. We'll call it vaccine factoids. And let me just put this up for you all as well. This is good stuff. Yeah, I see your comment, Pat, about caught in their own net. And I got a great biblical comment a little bit later on that I think kind of speaks to that in just a moment. So I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to come back to that. But this pharma thing with the vaccines, because I think this is a pretty amazing and interesting situation. So here's a couple of factoids from this article that I just put on the link for you. Currently, in the 1980s, U.S. children were routinely vaccinated against 7 diseases. That vaccine regimen included 2 shots and 1 oral administration. Now, so fast forward 45 years, the CDC recommends immunizations against 17 illnesses delivered in as many as 13 vaccines. So that from birth to age 18, a healthy child could receive up to 49 vaccine doses. Now think about that a minute. Almost 50 doses. Does that make sense? I just don't think it makes sense. Unless you are sick or ill, why are we doing this? And we don't know what the downstream results are of doing it, since we've only been doing this for the last 20 years or so. Could it be that a lot of these illnesses that we're seeing suddenly popping up, could they be possibly a result of this? The national media won't speak to that. Big media won't speak to that. But I think RFK is about to force this issue to be spoken to. Few other factoids. There's a lot of things in this article to discuss. I'm just going to cover a couple of the big ones. Pharmaceutical companies and their PACs, or the Political Action Committee, spent $15 million in campaign contributions to the last 2 presidential elections. So what do you think the impact of that's going to be? From the federal government, they're getting $387 billion in payments from Medicare, Part D, and Medicaid. So do you think for 1 second they're going to be interested in looking at medical changes that don't involve drugs? I don't think so. So we have to begin to divest ourselves or minimize the impact that government plays in this industry, or we're never going to get a solution to this. Plus, you have to realize that with regard to vaccines, there's no medical liability. And I think that's the single most important thing that's got to change. There's no other product or service in the United States where there's no no liability for delivering a bad product. You can't sue and make good, because where is the Where is the incentive to do the right thing if you don't have that? Well, they don't have that incentive, and clearly they're not doing it. So I think this is something that needs to be attacked, and I think it will be. Here was one, and my wife showed this to me this morning, and this is published in a major publication. I think it was something like People Magazine. I can't say that for sure, but here's a woman who's 27 years old. She's a marathoner in perfect health, and she's diagnosed with colon cancer. Now, we weren't seeing any of this stuff, 10, 20 years ago. Here's a doctor basically saying, uh, we have very significant rise in 20 to 40-year-olds getting colon cancer. So, but nowhere in this article do they ask any of the questions around what might be causing that. So what's changed in the last 5 years that will cause us to suddenly be getting this very significant increase in colon cancer in healthy 20 to 40-year-olds? These are people who don't have obesity, don't have diabetes, don't have any other issues. In this case, like a marathoner and a high-end athlete, and this is happening all the time, and nobody's asking the obvious question. So we're supposed to just believe that young people walk around and just fall over dead. Young people just walk around and have strokes. They have heart attacks. They get colon cancer. This is like unprecedented, and sooner or later they're going to get called to the carpet for this. And I can't wait till that day comes. It's going to be impossible to hide. And you're right, Pat. There's so much information out there now. People are talking to each other, whether national media is talking about it or not, like in an information exchange that we're having right now. People are having these conversations. People have gotten suspicious. And eventually the truth is going to come out. And we have the right man in place with Kennedy at the front speaking to these kinds of things. Pharma donations, here you go. 3.4 billion. Pharmaceutical interests spent 3.4 billion to influence legislatures between 1998 and 2024. Only insurance companies and electronics companies spent more. Now, if you don't think those dollars aren't going to go towards influencing these companies, then I've got some oceanfront property in Nebraska for you. So all of that's got to be taken care of and looked at, and I think that's going to happen. Here is an article. Well, you know what? This is a little bit too complicated for now. We're going to skip that one. I'm going to go to this other one because I think this is so interesting, and it kind of makes you think about it offers me an opportunity to make a biblical reference because I think this is so cool. So it allows me to riff on what Lori said earlier. And let me look at this article, the Russian hoax scam. I was in the car this morning and I heard that the Trump administration is moving forward with prosecution of this Obama and the Russia hoax scam. Now let's speak for a minute for just how significant this is. We're talking about a sitting president being accused of treason by a current president. This is completely unprecedented. This puts Watergate to shame when you get down to it. We're talking about a capital offense that once upon a time, I think it's still on the books, you were executed for treason. This is absolutely huge and it's absolutely incredible. And it looks like the evidence is there to support it. Otherwise, you wouldn't make such a bold proclamation right on national TV. Now, so the biblical side of this, I just couldn't help it. So I was looking at the book of Esther. And if you all, for those of you who like the Old Testament, in the book of Esther, there's the story of Haman, who was hanged on his own gallows. So if you remember the story, it went something like this. Haman and Mordecai were both advisors to the king. Mordecai was Jewish. Haman hated the Jews, and he hated Mordecai. And he thought the way to get rid of Mordecai was to basically kill all the Jews, in which case Mordecai be killed along with them. But unknown to Haman, the king's wife, Esther, or the queen, was also Jewish. And when the king found out about this scam that Haman had put together, he had Haman hanged on his own gibbet. And that gibbet was built to destroy Mordecai. So I just thought of that when I saw that article this morning about this Russian hoax, and it just seems like it fit. So this is going to be one of the most incredible. You sit here and you think to yourself, every week you say, this is the most incredible story. This is the most unbelievable story. Every week is another one. And it's hard to say if one's more incredible than the other, but can you imagine this? Now, here's what I personally hope happens. I have no idea what's going to happen. But the evidence sounds like it's pretty incontrovertible around this, that this Democrat president gets convicted. And I think the coolest thing in the world would be, I have to swallow my desire for revenge, if the man was convicted and then Trump pardoned him. Can you imagine the impact of that? So Obama gets convicted, Trump pardons him. What in the world could you say? Now, there's a whole bunch of other people that, of course, would have to go to jail in his administration, but it would be pretty ugly for a ex-president to be doing jail time. As much as I'd love to see this guy do jail time, I think it'd be better for the country for him to get convicted and then to have this president be gracious enough, kind of like what Abraham Lincoln did with General Lee at the end of the Civil War, to pardon him in the best interest of the country. So, anyway, interesting stuff, interesting stuff indeed. So, we're about 45 minutes into this, about 4 or 5 more articles I could cover, but my voice is giving out. I hope that you all got a lot out of this. That was a lot. And I really enjoyed it as well. Great news. As Sonny used to say, you never get tired of winning, and I'm certainly not getting tired of winning. It's like every day you come home, you can't wait to turn on the radio in the car home and see what left hook, what right uppercut, what body blow Trump has delivered to this cast of evildoers. And he has definitely delivered. So thank you all once again. I've thoroughly enjoyed this once more, and look very much forward to speaking to you all once again next Wednesday. Take care, everybody, and God bless. Good night now.